Okay, I spent 14.5 hours making a digital reproduction of one of the most iconic Berserk panels ever, and my favorite. I was really inspired by skilled artists who create such incredible black and white line work. Just a black ballpoint pen and paper are enough to create this. The rest is pure skill. The original drawing was created in a traditional way, using ink, G-pen and screen tones. Original size is A2, I think, which is about 3 and 7 times larger than my laptop screen, which is insane. Just look at how large it actually is. Let's take a quick look at overall composition. We can see foreground, middle ground and background. The viewpoint is positioned facing Zodd from below, emphasizing his scale and making him appear massive. I don't know whether Miura used the Fibonacci rule intentionally or intuitively, but the composition also fits it very well. All line work is radial, originating from that point. I also noticed that he deliberately adjusts Zodd's proportions to emphasize his size, exaggerating his horns, limbs, head or torso, depending on the composition. Like here, one horn is much bigger than the one closer to the viewer. Lines. Oh, the lines. Hatching is Kentaro Miura's main weapon for conveying information about objects, their form, direction of motion, texture, material, shadow and lighting. There are not many screen tones. He uses them only when he wants to push the darkest values without sacrificing texture. For example, to create darker values using only hatching, you need to increase line density. For lighter areas, you use fewer lines, but too many lines create a flat black shape and the texture is lost. To show the movement of the fur being enveloped by wind and steam released from his own body after transformation, Miura often combines hatching with directional movement. He frequently uses line flow to reinforce motion, wind and form. In action panels, he rarely uses cross-hatching. Instead, his lines usually follow a single dominant flow. In static panels, he uses hatching that floats the form while still avoiding heavy cross-hatching. I don't want to go too deep into Miura's style here, because it evolves over time and deserves an entire video to properly analyze. First, I started by sketching Nosferatu Zodd, zooming out and comparing it side by side with the original. It was quite easy, I finished him very quickly. But Guts... that was much harder. In my mind I understood how he should stand, but I struggled with the execution. And throughout the process I used the transform tool to position him. Most of the difficulty came from Guts' armor design. For him I made 2 sketches. After finishing a clean sketch of Guts, I adjusted the character's placement to match the original composition. Then I added the wings. The original art uses a lot of grey screen tone, so I also added grey early on to better understand how the volumes were working while inking. Before it, I also drew directional arrows to guide the hatching flow. First, I created a clean line art for Guts. Nothing to say, here I just tried to feel how to put lines. Then I moved on to Zodd, starting with shading. I noticed that Miura often uses ambient occlusion when rendering characters, which is also a shading approach I personally enjoy. This part went smoothly and I finished the torso very quickly. However, I struggled with the fur and the glowing flow of wind and snow. While drawing, I try to understand how the fur reacts and flows with the movement and air. Once I finished Nosferatu Zodd, I was satisfied with the result. Inking Guts was also challenging. The lines needed to be more precise and smaller compared to Zodd's, so I took a closer look at the reference and worked more carefully. I really enjoyed rendering the armor pieces. They have that dark metallic look that feels very satisfying to draw. The last part was the background. I started by refining the wind effects. Then I worked on darkness and atmospheric depth. It was difficult to recreate the glowing effect from the original, but I did my best. I don't have much else to say about the background, so here the final result. Фу, все. Буде як буде, нахуй.